This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Can it be so simple? The NBA Summer League just about wrapping up, but the NBA still pushes forward. Still a lot of news happening, a lot of signings going on. And as we are now moving a little bit closer to the middle of that off season, we're rounding out some of the final signings, a lot of things to get into. More importantly, some impressive showings in the NBA Summer League. I know my man was rolling out there, living it up in Sin City, fresh off of the plane in McCarran. My man, 50 grand, NBA aficionado, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC. My brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida now. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. How was that West Coast trip that you embarked on?
Las Vegas is always a great time, my dude. Always exciting to go out there and be amongst some of the NBA people that are going out there for Summer League and seeing all the general managers, all the fellow podcasters, obviously the players as well, too. I think the minute we got into Las Vegas, the Ball family had arrived and was walking in one direction of the airport. Philadelphia 76ers had gotten off their plane and was going to collect their luggage as I was walking in as well, too. So immediately as I stepped in, on the West Coast out there, got that sense of the NBA from the minute I got there in the airport, seeing all those NBA personalities and like that too. Great time out there as well. We caught up with some of our dudes from the Drive and Dish podcast, on Money Baller Network, all of that, man. It's an exciting time as always to be in Vegas during the summer.
Yeah, man. A lot of people, again, they fixate themselves on the idea that once the NBA Finals is done, there's that downtime. But, really a lot of the work for the other 28 teams that didn't, allow themselves an opportunity to be playing in the NBA Finals, that's where their work really begins because they have to figure out a way to improve upon whether their season was successful or to figure out what wasn't successful of this season. And look, we've talked about this with some franchises and some organizations in our previous podcast. This is also an opportunity for them to really reevaluate what has not been prosperous for their organizations. And sometimes it starts with the talent that they have out there that they're looking to put out on that basketball court for the patrons to purchase these tickets and put themselves in these arenas to watch them play. Teams like the Sacramento Kings and New Orleans Pelicans, you begin to wonder where how the overall effect of what they're doing as they're watching this summer league entity kind of blossom now. A few years ago, Shaw, we were talking about there's only like one summer league that was taking place. Now there's 3 summer leagues and a host of tournaments that are being provided within now and the time the training camp rolls around. So this is really a great opportunity for a lot of these organizations to give themselves as many chances as possible to evaluate the talent that they have, that they're looking for, and to really get things in order with their organizations if they expect to be successful as some of the top tier teams have already been in the last few years.
Yeah, as you alluded to, the way that it's grown out there, over 20 plus teams each year now in Las Vegas, but Utah having a summer league, Orlando having their summer league as well too. Not to mention that, even the fact that we had Pete Philo on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, then he invited us out to the Pro Scout School that was there too. So I got a chance to listen to Fred Hoiberg speak about Chicago Bulls and what it's like for him being in the front office and being a coach. There's just so many things going on around there that surround summer league, in addition to the evaluation of talent. The international guys are out there because we all know, obviously, not all these guys are going to be in the NBA. But this is a heavy recruiting ground for the international leagues as well, too, that Vegas has in their summer league, too. So, again, it is a basketball frenzy and community spirit, if you will, that takes place out in Las Vegas over the course of 10 days. And as always, it's just an amazing time and great to be a part of it all. Like I said, we got to connect with so many different people. And each year, I think it's going to continue to get a little bit better.
Definitely. So in this segment or this episode of the Baseline NBA podcast, we will talk a little bit about, final summer league impressions, who were the standouts, what some of the expectations were going to be for some of these guys that came out and balled out, as we start looking towards the beginning of training camp and the NBA season. Then in our segment of the drop, clearly the big talk of the town now is the Houston Rockets announcing their 4-year deal with James Harden, a little over $228 million. So that is going to be the standout. But there were some other significant signings. So once again, Shaw and I are on that fat tracker free agency tracker where we break down some of these deals, whether or not there's good signings. If they, some of these players are going to certainly help out other teams. So we got a lot to get into. We're also going to discuss some of the upcoming changes that will be taking place in the NBA in our coveted coast to coast. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on the major platforms: iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, Player FM, iHeartRadio, Google Music, and the Roku channel. So download any of those platforms. Allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things in the association. You know how we do, and you know how we roll. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it down.
To the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Cal Lee Warnshaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. Our segment of the breakdown: Summer League, not summer camp. Although you couldn't tell by the way the excitement was building in the air for the Lonzo Ball family. It's funny, Shaw, in that story that you brought up when you made it to Las Vegas, that the moment that LeVar Ball and the LeVar Ball clan touched down, it was like straight out of a scene of Game of Thrones, right? Like everybody in the airports, everybody all the way to the Thomas and Mack Center and the Cox Pavilion, basically knee on the ground, hailing the Messiah, the upcoming Messiah, the second coming of the Laker dynasty. It's funny to me. Like the Lakers look like Jon Snow. And then all of a sudden, now there's a resurrection and there's a light, guiding them to the promised land of greatness that the Lakers once have had. And wasn't it just but like 7 years ago that greatness was once claimed by Kobe Bryant 2 times over? So,
yeah, well, let me just, it's funny to me because when you talk about the impact of the Lakers in general, just show how strong that fan base is. Listen, Brandon Ingram was a top draft pick last year, was he not? He was out there in summer league, and there was a lot of buzz about the Lakers, but it really is the Lonzo Ball phenomenon, if you will, obviously coupled with his father, LeVar, because.
But if you're Brandon Ingram, Shaw, how are you feeling about that? Seriously, like how do you really feel about that?
It's summer league, so I don't think you feel any real type of way about it. But to me, it is a little bit surprising to see that. Okay, well, Brandon Ingram is a highly touted prospect. Technically, he's also number 2 draft pick or whatever it was. And now he came out there and he was really overshadowed by Lonzo. And
if I'm Brandon Ingram, I would feel a little salty about that, though, wouldn't I? I mean, not from an ego perspective, but I really do feel from a franchise perspective, because I almost feel like, all right, this is Magic Johnson and Jeannie Buss's and Rob Pelinka's pet project, the Lonzo Ball experiment, right? Like, he has got to be groomed to be the next guy. When it was Kupchak and Jerry Buss and, however many consultants, they came to this conclusion that drafting Brandon Ingram, that was the guy. That was, the transformation of the Lakers and where they're going and the direction that they're going into. And I feel bad because I'm not even including D'Angelo Russell, but I feel like with the situation with D'Angelo Russell, that was a sideshow, just went just completely, just got kicked. So, but to me, I just feel like if you're Brandon Ingram, you would feel some kind of way, because it's just like, damn, how many times are you going to go through a draft pick by saying that they are the, what I'm saying? They are they are what's going to put us where we need to be. And then now we're just working with Brandon Ingram.
Well, I think Ingram only got to play the one game, but in some senses, I think you're correct, because it is a new era for the Lakers. Magic Johnson and Pelinka, as you alluded to, those 2 guys are supposed to infuse new life into this Laker organization, plus the drafting of Lonzo Ball as well, too. So those are probably the reasons, the standout reasons why there was such an influx of LA fans. And there always is. I mean, it's a short drive for them to come over there and watch their squad, but they were just out there in droves, man. It was really an awe-inspiring thing. As a person who's been to Summer League in, I think, 8 out of the last 9 years, per se, I think this was the largest showing I've seen the Lakers had, and they always have a large showing. So kudos to that fan base for showing them the support. On Ingram, I think he was going to be just as good, if not better, than Lonzo had he got to play more than the one game before they shut him down. And that goes to show you, to some degree, what you're alluding to, rather, that Magic does believe that Brandon Ingram is going to be a large part of what they're doing because Ingram wanted to play. After that first game, he got hurt in I think in the final period or the final couple minutes there, and he could have played in game 2, 3. They're actually going to be in the summer league finals and everything, and they just shut him down. So they're taking his health and his longevity very very seriously as they really feel like he's a key piece of what they're doing.
Well, and look, I think then this is a great segue to your point, Shaw, about what were our overall impressions about the summer league. And I think that across the board, I'm not going to be one who's going to try to be pessimistic. I really do think that the NBA has taken um, great strides over the last few years to really showcase and highlight the talent. However, I do think that they have not done nearly as good enough job to really elevate the name and the play and the importance of the summer league as much as they are allowing the star power of the drafts to dictate the reason why people are coming to see these guys play. I mean, there's really been some really good basketball, but I do think it's being undermined because of the whole Lonzo Ball hype, right? And the situation that happened with Markelle Fultz with the Philadelphia 76ers. And I know we're going to get into the Philadelphia 76ers a little bit because I got a little bit of a bone to pick with the situation with Philly. But I do think that overall, there's really been some quality play. Jason Tatum, look, if he's going to be like how he showed himself out to be in Boston, I'm not going to knock Danny Ainge for at least making sure that he has got talented players who have the opportunity to play at a high level when the time presents itself this upcoming season. Whether that's going to translate in this window of the Celtics putting themselves in the NBA Finals, that's still well up in the air. But I can't be disappointed in the way that I'm seeing some of these other guys who were not 1 and 2 respectively in this year's NBA draft coming out and really showing us some impressive gameplay throughout the course of this NBA Summer League.
Well, looking at things in a vacuum, I think Tatum really did acquit himself extremely well just this summer.
He could break the Duke curse, bro. He could do it.
Yeah, I mean, but he seems to be a guy that the Celtics haven't really had in a while, especially from the draft class, a guy who's just a legitimate scorer, a guy who can just put the ball in the hole and can do it in a bunch of different ways. You saw him post up, you saw him shooting the three, hitting fadeaways, driving, dunking, all of those things. Just a very versatile guy who can also, grab a couple rebounds as well, too. Going back on it, I think a lot of questions about Josh Jackson. And Josh Jackson's played very well for the Phoenix Suns, but he's more of a Justice Winslow type where he's a slasher and he's a hustle type of guy, going to play good defense and things of that nature. And I think that's kind of what the infatuation was with Boston initially with Jackson. But I think in hindsight, and again, looking at things very, very, very short-sightedly, Tatum looks like he might be the better overall prospect offensively.
Where are you with the fact that the Philadelphia 76ers literally shut down all of the star players? With Markelle Fultz, he played a couple of games and he turned his ankle. And then, but really just in general, the Philadelphia 76ers they did not play Ben Simmons. I know that they're not going to play Joel Embiid. Clearly, this guy's a cornerstone player and it really acquitted himself this past season that there's no reason for him to need any true work if he's going to be who they're building around. But how do you feel about the fact that the Philadelphia 76ers all essentially shut down any, eye-popping players that you were probably looking to see come out there and perform for the Summer League?
Well, I think they had to with Fultz. It's just that's a team, as you have alluded to, they're snake bitten. So you see Fultz go down with that ankle injury after you drafted Ben Simmons and Okafor and Embiid and Nerlens Noel even, and all those guys have missed significant time in their first season. It's like, listen, they weren't going to take any chances. Just how the Lakers shut down Brandon Ingram, they were like, no sir, not with our number one pick who we traded up to get and mortgaged part of our future in order to do so. So I'm not too upset about them shutting down Fultz the way they did. At the end of the day, if he's a number one draft pick, does he really need summer league? It really was more for the fans to kind of get that going. And to be very honest with you, the Philadelphia 76ers have legit hopes and aspirations of making the playoffs. So pushing Fultz now in summer league is of no consequence to them whatsoever. They want to get him right. They said Ben Simmons wasn't going to play from the very outset, before the season, and that he would not participate in summer league at all. And they really want to make that thing run. What are they calling themselves? I think Feds is what it's boiled down to. Fultz, Ingram, Dario, and Simmons. So I mean, hey, it makes some sense to me that this team is really kind of focus on what they're able to be able to do in the Eastern Conference, especially with the Eastern Conference getting a lot easier per se with Paul George and Jimmy Butler and those guys moving out west. Philadelphia just has bigger plans than summer league.
But does it concern you though, Shaw, that when we're talking about this, and I want to keep this with, like as you said earlier, in a vacuum. I don't want this to be looked at with skepticism as much as it is just somewhat of a slight concern as you're building the brand of the summer league. Because as let's keep this in its proper perspective as well too. The Philadelphia 76ers have basically been in the lottery for the last 4 years. All right, essentially, they have had access to top picks. To your point, the injury bug has certainly plagued them and has minimized their decision-making process about how they can put these guys out there for the summer league. But do you think that this will be a concern moving forward when there are these opportunities to see quality players fresh from their draft to come out and play in a summer league? And it's always going to bind up being, say, teams like the Philadelphia 76ers and, maybe, even teams like the Sacramento Kings or whatever the case may be, where they're so enamored with their draft picks and stuff like that, to your point, not to push them out there, that it undermines the credibility of people paying the kind of money they're going to see their possible favorite players not participating in the summer league.
I mean, it's just the risk you take, regardless. You buy a ticket into a game, and you never know when someone's not going to be available. And I don't think we're going to get into that debate with summer league specifically that we have in the NBA, where guys are resting, and guys pay their money, or fans pay their money to see X player or X person come out there and play. It's just summer league is, at the end of the day, while it serves a vast importance for evaluation, it's still not that important in the grand scheme of player development. Yeah, it is a marketing tool that the NBA has definitely turned itself into, and it really is, a money making entity one way or the other. But I think there's enough value in the ticket that when you purchase, you pay your, I think now $35. They've raised prices from $25 even a year ago. At $35, that hey, you get to see 4 to 6 games a night, as a result of it. So in that regard, I think the NBA will always have that to fall back on if key guys from the draft don't end up playing in certain summer league games.
All right, Shaw. Let's go ahead and focus our attention on the standouts. You know, Lonzo Ball, his first game really wasn't all that impressive, but he really picked it up as the Lakers continued to advance themselves. Ultimately, they see themselves with an opportunity, as we're recording this podcast, to play in the Summer League Finals championships out there in Vegas. Who amongst you is really kind of put themselves out there as one to watch for, probably find themselves immediately having an impact for their respective basketball team?
Well, I don't think you have to look any further than Donovan Mitchell from the Utah Jazz. He played great, obviously, in the Utah Summer League, but played 2 games in Vegas, but seemed to be just ahead of the curve. And he's going to soften the blow somewhat from them losing Gordon Hayward. He's a competitor. Didn't know that he was this prolific of a scorer, and he was able to do it, from mid range and slashing. And he's a physical dude, and can really get his own shot off. So Donovan Mitchell, I think, is one of the major standouts from the summer league. Even only the 2 games he played averaged 28 a game. But more importantly, what he's going to be able to do for that wing position in Utah as they try to, again, soften the blow from Gordon Hayward. So that's for me. And a lot of guards really stood out. Other than, I think, Sheik Diallo from the New Orleans Pelicans, not too many big men had a overall great, impressive summer league. But the guards were really, really good. Brent Forms from the San Antonio Spurs, Mike James, not that old Mike James, a shorter, younger Mike James that the Phoenix Suns signed. He played very well, averaging 20 a game for them, which is going to be, I think, maybe collude their backcourt a little bit too, because they still have Brandon Knight there and Bledsoe and obviously Devin Booker. But Malik Beasley, he played well. Fred VanVleet from the Toronto Raptors, he played well as well too. Patrick McCaw, as you'd expect from the Golden State Warriors, they continue to stay loaded. He played well, averaging over 20 a game as well too for that franchise. So to me, it was a very guard-oriented summer league, which I guess it always is. Also, Wayne Selden, he played great for the Memphis Grizzlies too. But I really wish some more bigs would have stood out other than Sheik Diallo.
I got to tell you, the one guy who really stood out to me amongst the you ran through a plethora, so I'm very glad that you were engaged while you were out there in Sin City, Shaw. Because I figured that in between games, you were hitting the slot machines and stuff like that, trying to figure out a way to run, what I'm saying, to get our bankroll up so that we can,
Yeah,
you know
so
what I'm
I can
saying?
retire,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. So we could be podcasting, off of the sands of Barbados or something. But I have to tell you, from a good number of the games that I did watch, I was really impressed by Dennis Smith Jr. for the Dallas Mavericks.
Of course.
Um, this guy has he it was there was an article I can't quite remember. It was probably a few days ago, and it was almost like they did this cyborg reinvention of what Dennis Smith reminds you of. And one of the people that stood out to me that was interesting that they put on as one of those people that Dennis Smith's game reminds us of was Steve Francis. And I said to myself, I'm like, wow, that is so frighteningly real. Because whether you like Steve Francis or you didn't like Steve Francis was a baller, right? Like when Steve Francis was on that basketball court and he was engaged, locked in, that guy was damn near unstoppable. And if you're the Dallas Mavericks, you've been looking for a point guard with that kind of tenacity, I think, for quite some time. And he showed that. Whether his numbers didn't overly impress you, I really do feel that the tenor that was set by Dennis Smith might actually force, Rick Carlisle to give as much latitude as necessary to bring that out of him. Because we've seen how Rick Carlisle has been as a head coach at times. He doesn't have a lot of patience when it comes to the rooks. He tends to, keep them on a leash and doesn't allow these guys to make the necessary mistakes simply because if you've got veterans or, you just have a way of how you coach that you probably feel like, all right, that's enough. We'll revisit this whole thing when the time presents itself or when the circumstances are in such a way that I'm not thinking about, Dirk Nowitzki and trying to get the Mavs to the playoffs or where all hope is lost or whatever the case may be, or when it's the off season. I think that the way Dennis Smith has played so far in the summer league, that it might actually force Rick Carlisle to give him as much leeway as possible to be the future of the Mavericks franchise, which is something that seldomly is done, especially after you've given Dirk Nowitzki still another 2-year window of playing with the Dallas, playing for the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, there's no question about that when it comes to Dennis Smith Jr. And I'm glad you brought his name up. Um, Mark Stein, I think, reported at some point during the summer that the Mavericks are all in on their youth movement and their new core. They know Dirk is, he re-signed, has got another 2-year deal or whatever the case may be, but Dirk is on his way out, and they know that, and Dirk understands that, and he's trying to make way for these new guys. They're building their core around Dennis Smith Jr., around Harrison Barnes, and eventually Ernest Noel once they re-sign him and bring him back into the fold. They're handing him the keys immediately. There's not going to be any of that rookie stuff going on. It's like, all right, well, Rook, you're going to have to sit here and learn behind Devin Harris. Devin Harris's days of being useful on the court on a regular basis and being a full-time starter, that's long past. So Harris is not going to start over him. Yogi Ferrell, Seth Curry, they're not going to start over Dennis Smith at the point guard position. He's got, as you said, he's got too much size, too much athleticism, and too much future. Too much ceiling to grow into for them to not give him the keys to the kingdom.
But this might actually be a good thing for someone like Seth Curry. I know I don't want to be saying I'm sipping on the Curry Kool-Aid, all too much, or I've been sticking my nose in the crock pot. You know what I'm saying, when Curry starts building the aroma in the air. But I think Seth Curry is a solid basketball player. And I really feel like in the right system, him at the 2 position might actually be adequate for him than taking on the responsibilities of being the point guard like his brother Steph Curry is, because Steph Curry's game had always evolved around his ball handling capability, where Seth Curry's game has always evolved around his ability to play off the dribble, to play, without it being him being the primary ball handler. That might bode well if you're the Dallas Mavericks, if Seth Curry continues on the trend of where he's been the last couple of seasons and what he's done this past season as a starter for the Dallas Mavericks.
I agree. I mean, yeah, he's got to play off the ball, and Dennis Smith will allow him to do that because Smith has some, great playmaking abilities, which should allow Seth to be able to pop open in the corners and, again, take 1 or 2 dribbles to get his shot off, but not to be a dribble incessant ball handler or to even run pick and roll himself. They can run pick and roll with Smith and Curry and see how that goes, and force defenses to play Smith off the dribble or Curry on a pop. For me, again, I think that's probably the best effective use of Seth Curry in the Dallas Mavericks system. And as I said, I think they're going to be very happy with what they're building in that young core. Again, maybe not everybody is thinking that they're going to be all that great in the very near future. But if Smith reaches anywhere near the level of Steve Francis in Steve Francis's day before he kind of went awry, I think they'll be very happy with that, especially getting him as low as they did. A lot of people are saying that he's a steal of the draft, outside of even Donovan Mitchell, who I guess who went at 14. But everyone's like, listen, you should have taken Smith maybe at 5 before, instead of taking him at 9.
All right, anybody who you feel like really has not lived up to their hype so far yet might need a little bit of work. Whether it's through the course of this regular season or just, somebody who may who has NBA aspirations but D League potential or G League potential, excuse me, at the very moment from what you've seen or heard as far as the summer league goes.
No, I mean, I think everyone's played to their respective level, if you will. I think I would have maybe wanted to see maybe a little bit more out of Wade Baldwin, but he didn't play bad. Wade Baldwin played well for the Memphis Grizzlies for the most part. But you wanted to see it, like you want to see those second year guys come out there and just truly and thoroughly dominate. And not too many of those guys did that. I think even Jaylen Brown, who lit things up in Utah, didn't have a great time in Vegas, and maybe he was tired and kind of was worn down a little bit. But that didn't really work out too well for him as well too. I think Dragan Bender is a guy who I was looking to maybe do a little bit more in Phoenix, and maybe he got caught behind Josh Jackson and then Mike James, who were playing
Chris
and those guys. So I wish Bender would have played a little bit, would have been a little bit more dominant, but not going to take anything away from anybody. And at the same time, although you want people to be able to go out and dominate in a certain level at some league, you don't want to read too much into it because people are writing off Lonzo Ball after the first game too, right? So there's a happy middle ground that we have.
I sure as heck didn't write him off. I'm just a little concerned about the overall hype of Lonzo Ball and how that could impact guys prior to the drafting of him, guys like you put with Brandon Ingram. So yeah.
Well, your guy Isaiah Whitehead too. He could have done a little bit more, but I'm gonna leave that go.
Whoa! Did you just black out Whitehead? What? Come on now. I mean, listen. I thought he proved quite a substantial amount for Brooklyn. I mean, where was Jeremy Lin? Jeremy Lin should be playing in the G League right about now, right? No, not G League. I'm sorry, Summer League. Probably give himself an extra stint in the Summer League. I still feel like he's still playing in the Summer League. I was curious.
One other guy. One other guy I want to point out too that I don't think played that well. Now that we're talking about it was Denzel Valentine. I mean, he had I think 1 or 2 games where he showed, but he's somebody who I'm very high on. I like guys who are versatile and have that kind of all around game. And he has a great opportunity now in Chicago to really go out there and be a plus minutes type of player. With whatever they end up deciding with Wade, but LaVine coming over there well too. Like I don't know if Valentine's going to be in the market for a starting position. Obviously, he's not better than LaVine or Wade. But if they waive Wade or buy him out, then that gives him some opportunity. I wish he would have did a little bit more in his time out there in Las Vegas.
Two people I want to quickly get your take on because I'm not sure whether or not you really went in depth with Bam Adebayo from out of Miami and De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento. So one thing about De'Aaron Fox, I was really impressed with De'Aaron Fox. He clearly has a lot of work to do. But for his age, his upside is crazy. If he can put it together, in the earlier side of, 21, then waiting it on the latter side of it. I seem to feel like if these guys don't start figuring things out very quickly within that age range, then it just becomes a tougher climb in the same system that they play in because I think it wears on a young mind that they're able to, be the kind of player they potentially can be. But De'Aaron Fox, I think, is going to be a solid point guard if the Sacramento Kings get their act together, their development staff together properly, and work this kid in the way that he will be. But I was really impressed with Bam Adebayo, Shaw, and I'm not sure whether or not you had seen him in action a couple of times, but that guy is a brute. That guy brings a level of physicality at a young age that most of these guys take 2-3 years. Like Justice Winslow to me felt like a nicer version of Bam Adebayo. Like this guy can come in and be an enforcer very quickly in the NBA for a team like the Miami Heat that's got some supplemental parts. He could be that nasty that sits next to Isaiah Whitehead, and Whitehead could just continue to smile and get his 15 blocks a night. But Bam Adebayo would be that guy that's like that Ben Wallace, without the hair. He could just be Bam Bigelow Adebayo already for the Miami Heat, which I know is something that they've been looking for quite some time.
Yeah, Pat really did a great job with Bam. I think everyone has said that, listen, he's outplayed his draft position already as well too. So they've gotten a lot of value for him. I guess at 14 in the lottery. Can't remember. Don't have the draft board in front of me currently, but Bam is not the 14th best player in this draft. And he played extremely well, as you said, alluded to a lot of energy, a lot of physicality, and should be a great fit alongside Whiteside and the Miami Heat. What they decide to do this upcoming season. They didn't get everything they wanted to get out of it. And we've already talked about them re-signing Dion Waiters and James Johnson, things of that nature. Just don't know if Bam will be the starting power forward or he'll come off the bench behind Johnson, depending how Spoelstra wants to play. But he's going to get some minutes out there. And I think they have a nice little duo going with Winslow and Bam Adebayo that they can rely on. And to De'Aaron Fox's point real quick, with the signing of George Hill, you just wonder now, does that set him back a little bit? Whereas Dallas, as you said, we just talked about them giving the keys to Dennis Smith Jr., De'Aaron Fox was supposed to be able to get the keys and just kind of go out in Sacramento. George Hill now is not a guy who's at the latter stage of his career where he's just okay. He just wants to be a veteran leader. He's a guy who plays. So even if you decide to play him off the ball, how much time will De'Aaron Fox get this upcoming summer? This upcoming season. Because remember, Buddy Hield's still there as well too, and they're dubbing him the next Steph Curry, right? So it's a little interesting for Fox.
But Shaw, this goes to the point that we've been talking about ad nauseum. When is this perception of getting veteran players become too much? It's good to have a balance. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure that, in a utopian way of thinking in the NBA, you get the right balance of veterans with the right upside of the young guys and rookies and things of that nature, and you might mold the perfect team. But if you're a franchise like the Sacramento Kings, sometimes having young, exciting basketball players can actually elevate people's excitement to come to the games, rather than seeing the same guys who have went and not won in other places come to your organization and really essentially do nothing that is meriting the idea that the investment that you made was actually going to help some of these players. Like, in other words, to me, if George Hill didn't go out and win a championship anywhere else that he played for, and then now coming here to the Sacramento King, while I think that what he's doing is admirable and is going to be helpful for a guy like De'Aaron Fox, what does it amount to if the Sacramento Kings still wind up only winning 20 games this season? It's not as if whatever he's translating to De'Aaron Fox suddenly now becomes of utmost importance unless De'Aaron Fox is actually on the basketball court translating that knowledgeable veteranship that George Hill is instilling upon him behind the scenes. And I think that's what's going to discourage fans' enthusiasm about wanting to come see the Sacramento Kings play if it's too much veteran and not enough rookie play.
Well, I can agree with that. I think, if it comes about who's selling more tickets, I think De'Aaron Fox at this stage of his career is going to sell more tickets than George Hill. But the Sacramento product itself needs to be better on the floor, and that organization needs to trend in the right direction. So I know we talked about it in our last show a little bit about Sacramento adding Hill and Zebo and Vince Carter, and did they kind of overdo it, if you will? And that remains to be seen. I agree that I'm not sure how the Fox-Hill-Hield combination is all going to work. Because you've got to get all those guys minutes, especially you play George Hill. You pay George Hill to be there. He's not going to just not play. Unless he's injured, which obviously we know he is a lot. But yeah, I'd rather see Fox and Hill kind of build their chemistry. But Hill will find his way into it, and that's going to be up to Jaeger to kind of figure it out and sift out that rotation to make sure it works for everybody.
All right. Well, listen, so much again has happened over the course of these last 3 weeks of basketball with the NBA Summer League. We've seen some great talent get out there and show us a little something. And so it's got us all clamoring when the NBA tip off where these guys will be, whether it be in the starting position, coming off the bench, or in critical situations, helping their basketball teams ultimately win games. But nonetheless, we can definitely feel safe in saying that we have some quality players out there ready to showcase their talents for this upcoming NBA season. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Breakdown. Time now for The Drop. Callie Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. Our version of the free agency tracker, the Fat Report. So we're not going to waste any time with this. You obviously know the headliner for the Fat Tracker this week, Houston Rockets shelling out the Brinks truck for Mr. James Harden. James Harden, money man, 4-year, $228 million deal. Everybody across the board is looking at this, Shaw, as a win-win situation. And so I'm so happy that you made it back from Vegas. You know what I'm saying? Like, guys like us, we got to play the Powerball to see this kind of money. But if you are someone who's been watching the play of James Harden over the last few seasons, and you've been watching what the Houston Rockets have been doing over the last few seasons and trying to put together a championship caliber basketball team, is this really, in fact, a win-win situation?
I mean, it gives us the team stability, and I think Daryl Morey and the Houston Rockets want that. They don't want to be feeling like OKC losing Durant, or the Heat when they lost LeBron, or the Cavs when they lost LeBron the first time. They don't want to have that situation. They want to go ahead and lock up their superstar, even if you're going to be paying him more than he's essentially worth past his prime a little bit. They want to make sure that they have that security, that they can have their guy and the guy that they're building around for the upcoming year. Again, I understand the numbers massive. He got the super max. I understand that over $50 million a year for any player in any sport it seems absurd at some point. But Houston felt like they needed to do this, and kudos to Daryl Morey and that's Alexander, right? For the owner there to making that commitment to this Houston Rockets team. That means they're going to be in the luxury tax territory if they're going to be at a championship level. And you just hope that that's what they end up doing. They've made a lot of solid moves, a lot of great moves to that supplement. To supplement James Harden getting this money. They're building the pieces around him that should make this team competitive for a very long time.
All right, so I am completely on board with you about this, Shaw. And I would encourage people, if they don't have an opportunity, go to, Real GM. That's one of the great, go-to resources of, capturing all of these deals and free agency transactions that take place. And we're not trying to, do shameless plugins here. No, seriously, go to this website. They have great writers who kind of break down the schematics of these particular deals. I find it interesting, Shaw, that we're talking about stability, right, as one aspect of it. But on the flip side of this, what does this now say about James Harden and what he is going to have to do in the next few years? Let's keep in mind, James Harden has been an MVP runner-up now, basically 2 years in a row. Okay? In that time span, we had already a few weeks ago talked about Steph Curry being the $200 million man. Okay? Now, this isn't a question about who gets there first, but now it does become a question of when you look at the contracts and what players have done within the scheme of those contracts, how much more pressure now is on James Harden to now take it to that next level, especially with the Houston Rockets figuring out a way to make the trade to bring Chris Paul over there? Because you have to wonder if whether or not James Harden is going to, I don't want to say give up. I'm just saying that with Chris Paul, will it work in his favor that James Harden can now still be an MVP player now that he's going to have the kind of help at that backcourt position that's going to put him in this situation where the money now is meriting the accolades and the awards?
It's a tough spot, I think, to gauge, from the outside looking in for sure. Listen, we've seen Harden melt down
Exactly.
point blank in two of the biggest games of his life. You know what I mean? That one game a couple years ago against the Golden State Warriors where he had, I think, 10 turnovers. And then this past season against the San Antonio Spurs on his home floor, they got routed, and he played an atrocious game. So we've seen the meltdown, even going back to his days, the first time when he was with OKC and they got to the finals, he didn't play well. Those moments, that's what the big money is for, and you want to see him kind of succeed in that. And I think the Houston Rockets understand, or at least are hopeful, that getting a guy like Chris Paul and putting other pieces around him will allow him to be better and allow him to be successful in those moments. But again, we have to wait and see. They have to get there first and foremost, and then he has to perform once they get there. I think it's a valid question to raise, but I think we're past the stage of sports, analysis, if you will, where you're looking at a financial number and saying, okay, well, this guy makes X amount of dollars, so he has to do this. I think we're at the stage where it's like, okay, well, for top level talent, you're going to have to pay for the top level talent. And yeah, you need to hold them to a higher standard in terms of their performance and what they end up doing. But if they don't perform, it's no longer like, okay, well, this guy makes $50 million. He didn't do it. Like, that isn't really necessarily the standard anymore. It's about, okay, can you stay competitive and can you continue to keep your team together? Again, I don't think that's a fair standard, but I think that's what we're trending to ever since the days of Joe Johnson in Atlanta, where he had that huge contract. It was like, okay, well, Joe Johnson, a max guy. We already know max contracts are not what they used to be. So Harden, although he has a lot of some big shoes to fill, I don't know that he's going to be held to the same standard, especially, with a guy like Chris Paul there to kind of share the blame with.
Isn't it funny how some 15 years ago, Shaw, it wasn't even just predicated on the talent as much as it was predicated on the market. And now most of these teams that are in those small markets, and we've talked about this at some time before. Most of these teams that are in those small markets, the markets are not is not what's dictating this as much as it's the owners, the cap, and the outward marketability factor that these guys choose to or want to play into. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
it's interesting how far we've come when it comes to something like that. All right, so let's go ahead and run through a lot of the other free agency tracker scenarios. We'll do it coast to coast style. Shaw, I throw them out, you sling them right back to the listeners on what your impressions are with these deals and how beneficial they can or may not be for their organizations. Jamal Crawford, 2-year deal, 8.9 mil with the Minnesota Timberwolves. How are we feeling about this one?
Hey, at least they get some backcourt scoring. They get a guy who can shoot the three, a guy who can take over a game, for a couple minutes at a time. Yeah, he's older. We understand that and hasn't had the greatest time in LA, but
So that
maybe it was
means
just
Tom
time for him to
Thibodeau
get out
can't
of there.
scream on him if you don't play defense.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. But I think Crawford is a guy, who's is always a legitimate six man, a guy who can come off the bench and really give you that scoring punch. Minnesota needs that. They lost some shooting in the addition of Jimmy Butler. So I like the signing of Jamal Crawford from Minnesota.
Yeah, and he needs to talk to Carl Anthony Towns about wearing, what I'm saying, no t-shirt and a vest on these beef jerky commercials as well too. He needs to kind of
Well,
instill a little bit of
these beef jerky
veteran
commercials to
insight.
begin with.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Like, or get him another nickname and stuff like that, man. But that sleeve, that no shirt with the vest thing next to Sasquatch, that ain't playing right. Toronto Raptors have traded DeMar Carroll to the Brooklyn Nets. Can we say that probably is the one deal that we can actually stick it to Masai Ujiri as not a good deal for the Toronto Raptors?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they've corrected their mistake. Getting rid of Carroll's contract. It just
Why
didn't
is it
really have
always
much of.
everyone that correct their mistakes wind up in Brooklyn, man? You know what I'm saying? Like this is not this is the part of Brooklyn that I'm just not liking. You know what I'm saying? I'm from there. We're much better than this. I feel like I feel like the Transformers movie. What was that one Transformer? They in that Junkyard Planet. Junkion. You know what I'm saying? It's like just send them all to Junkion, like Brooklyn. That's where we are. We collect the scraps in Brooklyn. Like, come on, man.
They're just trying to accumulate some players, and they'll take on the salary as long as they can get a pick as a result of it too. So obviously, all their picks going to Boston for the next 45 years or whatever it seems like. They're just happy that they'll take on some bad contracts. And the DeMar Carroll experiment just did not work out. Clearly, a guy who in his last year in Atlanta played extremely well, played above his pay grade in a lot of ways, and cashed in on that. And he's not a bad dude. It just didn't work out for him in Toronto.
All right, CJ Miles, he agrees to a 3-year, $25 million deal with the Raptors due to that sign-in trade. I'm a little leery about this one, Shaw, because as much as I kind of like CJ Miles, he's a good spot reserve player. I have to think that in some way, shape, or form, uh, they're assuming that he's going to be an upgrade over DeMar Carroll, but is he really?
Well, I think they're looking for him to be more of a scorer. Where Carroll is supposed to be the 3 and D guy, CJ Miles is really just a three guy. He doesn't play any of the D. That comes along with that. But he does give them some versatility. Miles played some four in Indiana as well too, so you can maybe stretch things out for them. If they want to go with a Bach at the five and have that lineup have a little bit more spacing. Toronto, with CJ Miles again, it's an acceptable signing, especially at that price tag. It gets them from underneath that DeMar Carroll contract as we just alluded to, and he'll be okay over there. Again, it's not going to shake up the world for the Toronto Raptors, but it is a decent piece and a decent fill-in for DeMar.
All right, out in Boston, the bearded one, Aaron Baines.
Bane.
Bane, you know what I'm saying? The Bane comes to Boston. 1-year deal, 4.3 mil. Listen, given how they've been shuffling through anybody in the front court, they don't have Kelly Olynyk any longer. They released Tyler Zeller. I'm not disappointed in this play to get Aaron Bain. I mean, he's certainly not the solution, but he can be a solution for the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, I think he's going to come in there and potentially be the starter right away, unless they decide to go small and play Horford at the five and Crowder at the four, or whatever the case may be. But Baines has a legitimate opportunity to be the starting center for Boston on opening night. I got tweeted the minute I got off the plane in Vegas because of the Avery Bradley trade that sent Bradley to Detroit for Marcus Morris, and they were like, "Oh, well, what about Morris? Or what are we getting? What is the Celtics getting in him too?" And I honestly said, "Hey, I would have preferred they got Aaron Bain as a result out of that trade, but it didn't work out. Well, now they got Morris and Baines. So I think Boston is in the best situation they can be. Getting a guy of his magnitude and caliber at that price tag. I guess that's a mid-level exception that he took. At 4.3 million for a guy who's a good rebounder, nice soft hands around the rim, and can score in the post. I like that. I like that pickup for Boston.
All right, Dwayne Dedman, he agrees to a 2-year, $14 million deal with the Atlanta Hawks.
Playing time.
He had a really good, he had a solid season with the San Antonio Spurs. Shout outs to Popovich, man, resurrected this dude's career because he's been a journeyman throughout the NBA so far in his career.
Yeah, an active big man who can definitely rebound, block some shots, and can fill it up around the rim. In lob situations and things of that nature. Playing times are going to be key for him. Atlanta with Dwight Howard now out of the fold, they don't really have a starting center, so Dedmon can go there and be that guy. But hey, at $7 million a year, I think Atlanta could do a lot worse in free agency than Dedmon. So nice pickup for them, and I think a great opportunity for him to kind of hone his game and maybe build up on his statistics over the next 2 seasons.
Los Angeles Lakers, they go out and get Contavious Caldwell-Pope, 1-year, $18 million deal. I'm happy for Contavious. I am not happy about the fact that he's playing for the Los Angeles Lakers, and it's not because I have any animus to the Los Angeles Lakers. I just don't understand the logic of this move.
Yeah, well, I'm not really understanding where the Lakers were going with this one either. But they're trying to be competitive immediately. And then I guess in essence, they would have the opportunity to retain him next season once they try to get into the Paul George and Russell Westbrook sweepstakes and LeBron and all that stuff like that too. KCP gives them a solid shooting guard for this upcoming year. That will set them in the right direction, pair him alongside Lonzo Ball, as we alluded to a little bit earlier. So you're looking at a lineup of, I guess it would be Ball, KCP, Brandon Ingram, Julius Randle, and Brook Lopez as their starting 5 going into next season. And again, it may not, make you shake in your boots or anything of that nature, but it's a pretty decent squad put together, a nice young squad that can potentially build together. For KCP, just it's unfortunate for him, once the Pistons acquired Avery Bradley from Boston, the market then in essence dried up. And there wasn't a lot of places where he was going to be able to go out there and get, a 3-year deal worth, $40 million or whatever it is he might have been looking for. So he takes this 1-year prove-it deal with the Lakers. He has $18 million. He's not tied to them. They're not tied to him, and they can both parties can part ways if need be, or they can stick together as the Lakers try to form their super team.
All right, out in Utah, Thabo Sefolosha, 2-year, $10.5 million deal. I'm surprised that, first of all, I'm surprised that Thabo Sefolosha is still playing in the NBA. More importantly, I'm even equally surprised that any deal that was being provided to him is somewhere in the $1 million range. I mean,
Wow.
Look, Thabo Sefolosha is an adequate
he's
an adequate basketball player, but he ain't he's definitely not been on the list of quality basketball players that have come out of France that has merited or warranted something in this nature where the guy is getting essentially getting $5 million for the next 2 years, especially for a playoff playing team like the Utah Jazz. I fail to see where the metrics equal out where Thabo Sefolosha can be beneficial to this team.
Well, I think that's a little harsh. $5 million is not a large number in today's market.
I'll give him 2. I'll give him 2. But 5? 5?
All right, man. So
it's a generous cap, man. This is a generous cap. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think from Utah's standpoint, this is a team that, they hang their hat on defense, right? So Sefolosha is a guy who can come there and do some of that from that standpoint, and hopefully be able to shoot the 3. Rubio with their new point guard there, maybe you can get him open and get him some corner threes per se. But Sefolosha is really there to play defense and improve on one of the best defenses that were in the NBA for the last 3 seasons under Coach Quinn Snyder. So for them, that's what this deal is about. It's not a large number, not tied up for a long period of time as well too. Sefolosha comes there, helps out even a guy like Donovan Mitchell, maybe even Rodney Hood a little bit, and it gives them some mentorship at that veteran spot.
All right, Ersan Ilyasova, 1-year, $6 million deal with the Atlanta Hawks. I feel like we had mentioned this sometime last year about Ersan Ilyasova, didn't we?
Yeah, hey, he's not a guy.
The guy just still winds up in the NBA.
And it's a weird situation because he was in Atlanta already, and then I guess he was in Philly, and it's a reunion. This journeyman. Yeah, and I think he can play, at that stretch 4 position, but he's a long way away from, I guess it was 3 or 4 seasons ago, Milwaukee, where he was, a great rebounder and a good 3-point shooter. He's just becoming kind of a journeyman rotation player. And in Atlanta, hey, I think he'll same thing like Dedmon. He'll have some minutes and opportunity with Millsap also gone as well as Dwight Howard. So it gives him an opportunity to maybe re-up and kind of bolster his statistics a little bit in Atlanta as they, I guess, struggle and rebuild.
Atlanta's in the mood of bringing players back, man. Bring back my boy Pero Antic, bro. Bring them
Oh
on.
Lord,
Bring them
it is
all
Pero.
back. You know what I'm saying? Just
Pero.
I like this one here. Jonathan Simmons. This is a guy that paid $150 to participate in a D League tryout. He winds up being an intricate part of even stitching together some kind of competitiveness for the San Antonio Spurs in playing in the Western Conference Finals against the Golden State Warriors this past season. They renounced his restricted free agency rights. So now this guy is free to go and sign with someone. He signs a 3-year deal with the Orlando Magic. I'm happy for Jonathan Simmons because the guy is going to get paid money. It sucks though because he's going into a very, very questionable situation in Orlando, but still happy for JS.
Yeah, I think he's going to have an opportunity to compete and get minutes out the gate. Depending on how heavily you believe in a guy like Evan Fournier. Fournier probably mans the 2 position, and that's really it. But at the 3 position, I think that's going to be a wide open spot for Simmons to go out there and get his minutes on a regular basis. I think he can beat out Terrence Ross, who they acquired last year in the Ibaka trade. So I think Simmons will have a great opportunity in Orlando, and I'm happy for him as well too. Sad it didn't work out for him in San Antonio, but at the end of the day, he's a guy who plays defense, a guy who's proved to be a decent scorer and slasher. So Orlando can definitely use that in the Frank Vogel system.
I mean, do you find it a little remarkable, Shaw, that he gets a 3-year, $18 million deal to play with the Orlando Magic? Thabo Sefolosha gets a 2-year, $10.5 million deal. And we're talking about how Jonathan Simmons is still getting paid less than Thabo Sefolosha.
Well, he's going to get more, is it not? I mean, it's hard for Simmons. I think.
No need to try and rest. You know what I'm saying? Explain the case for Thabo. I know I'm being too harsh.
No, but I feel like Simmons. I think he kind of got caught in that, whirlwind, if you will, of what was going on in San Antonio. The Spurs decided to go in another direction.
Let me ask you: would you have liked to have seen Jonathan Simmons play for the Utah Jazz?
I think that would have been a nice pickup for them. Yeah.
Okay. We're just gonna leave it at that, and we'll get on to the final one. That's all I wanted to see. If you were enamored with that thought.
No, I think Utah. Yeah, if they could have made that happen. I think a lot of teams that could have made that happen should have really kind of been beating down his door a little bit. His agent.
I'd love to see him in Memphis. To be honest with you, I mean, Vince Carter's no longer. I would love to see him in Memphis. I think he would be awesome in Memphis as well.
Yeah. Well, they committed money to Tyreek Evans of all people.
Rake the freak.
Yeah, I mean, I've interviewed Tyreek a couple of times. He's a good cat, but I mean, that team is desperate for shooting, and that's not what Evans does.
Oh, so you got that Thabo scowl about Tyreek signing to Memphis, throwing that money to Tyreek.
I mean, it was again. He signed like same thing. He got the mid-level exception in Memphis, so it is what it is. But yeah, I just think like they could have gotten a more of a slashing type player and a guy who could shoot the 3 ball better than Tyreek, who's more ball dominant and more of a driving guy than Simmons is even at this stage of his career. I know we have one more, but I want to throw one thing out there before we move on to that even too. Luke Mamute also signed as we were recording with the Houston Rockets. So again, more defense to go alongside PJ Tucker, more 3-and-D type players to go alongside Harden and Chris Paul, and some tougher guys to play alongside those guys as well too. Obviously, Mamute knows Chris Paul very well from his days with the Clippers, so I think that's a nice signing for the Rockets too if they get Mamute on a minimum deal.
All right, way to be on that one, Shaw. I like that. And finally, Shaw, the Rajon Rondo search is finally over. He's toured LA. He's toured Sacramento again, probably. He's probably, toured Atlanta. I'm sure Atlanta would have probably thrown him the Brinks truck if they wanted to as well, too.
Well, I don't know no Brinks truck. You know what I mean?
His landing destination is in New Orleans. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? He's like, listen, I couldn't resist the gumbo, right? Because already the team that's already in place there is like jambalaya. So Rajon Rondo out there in New Orleans. How we feeling about this one?
I think it's an interesting move for the Pelicans. I do feel like this is New Orleans' last stand. Like, I just don't know why. That's just the feeling I get. This is a big contract here for DMC. They re-signed Drew Holiday at a large number, as we already alluded to. But this signing of Rondo signifies that they're entertaining the idea of playing Holiday off the ball at the 2-guard position.
That was the very next thing I was going to ask you. Do you like the idea now that we're going to probably see Drew off that off the ball scenario? Because clearly there's no way you're paying Rondo that money and he's not starting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's clear cut that that's the case, but I think it's something that they're definitely going to look at. I think Rondo will have an opportunity to earn the starting guard point guard position, and Holiday to play off the ball. I don't know how that will work, because I just haven't done enough
I
research
don't know
on
how it's going to
Holiday.
work with Gentry as the head coach. That's a
Yeah,
very interesting
yeah,
dynamic.
I just haven't done a lot of analysis on Holiday off the ball playing the two to give an answer on that right now. That's something I'd like to research myself and see if that's how he'll be best used going into next season. But again, Rondo coming there, a guy who played with Cousins already, has a bit of rapport with Cousins as well too. I think he'll be great for Anthony Davis's, going into the season. Rondo's a great pick and roll guy, a guy who's going to make sure everybody gets involved and gets their touches. So Holiday can be more of a perimeter threat and shoot that mid-range shot that he's pretty good at as well too. I think it could work out. I just don't know how good New Orleans is going to be in the Western Conference overall.
All right. Well, there you have it. All of the free agency signings that have taken place over the last week or so. Some important ones is that Shaw, Cal, keeping you on it and giving you the brutal, honest truth about how we feel about some of these signings nonetheless. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time now to go coast to coast, discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
All right. NBA changes for 2017-2018 season. First up to play, the trade deadline is going to be moved up and take place before the NBA All-Star Weekend. Also, are important points with regards to some of the changes taking place. Teams will have 7 timeouts per game with no restrictions per half. All team timeouts will be 75 seconds in the previous format. Full timeouts will essentially be 90-second. All team timeouts will be 75 seconds in the previous format. Full timeouts were 90 seconds and 20-second timeouts. Now both the full and the 20-second timeouts are being replaced by just straight team timeouts. Each team will have 2 team timeouts per overtime. Previously, there were 3, and halftime will be at least 15 minutes for all games, beginning immediately upon expiration of the second period. A delay of game penalty will be issued if a team is not ready to start play at the expiration of the halftime clock. Overall, and all that being said, Shaw, it sounds like what the NBA is looking to do is to speed the game up a little bit more and also minimize a lot of the in-between time of timeouts as teams are in the heat of competitive play.
Yeah, man, let's get this ball on the road. You know what I mean? I think that's what Adam Silver, the NBA, is saying, especially in regards to all the timeout changes and things of that nature for the upcoming season. I like the rule changes. I think most people still don't understand why a 90-second timeout isn't 90 seconds or why a 20-second timeout isn't 20 seconds. Why are they, at this kind of arbitrary number,
people are like using like the commercials as their TV timeout.
Right.
More so than the timeouts themselves, right?
Yeah, and they also changed, I think, the mandatory timeouts per quarter to a larger or to a lessened amount. Instead of 3 per quarter, it's going to be 2, and they're going to be at different points of each quarter as well too. So it makes some more game time and more game flow can happen within the flow of the NBA games going on this upcoming season. The thing that I like the most about all the things that they did, obviously, is the trade deadline.
Oh, that's so important
for All-Star.
That's so important.
Yeah, because it's going to be great so that the players themselves can actually enjoy All-Star instead of being kind of badgered by reporters and everybody like, hey, well, you know what, the deadline.
They should call this. They should call this the Melo rule.
Yeah. I mean, bro, because we were there. I think that was Dallas.
Yep, that was Dallas.
I can't remember which All-Star that was. Where again, that was the entire conversation. And it does become a little bit of a distraction. The players themselves can't really enjoy it with all that stuff going on. So moving it ahead of All-Star break, I think is a great move for the NBA so that the players themselves won't have to face all those questions and they can just enjoy what's going on in that city at their respective moment for All-Star.
Yeah, it's just too much scrutiny. I mean, clearly everybody is thinking about this with relation to the DeMarcus Cousins situation, but I think it was more than just DeMarcus Cousins, and that's the reason why I alluded to the Carmelo Anthony situation, because quite frankly, I felt like what happened with Carmelo Anthony was far more egregious and detrimental to the atmosphere of the NBA All-Star Weekend Whereas with the situation with DeMarcus Cousins, it happened post the NBA All-Star game. And that was really more of the talk about it, not, the discussion, which, they haven't really addressed what we saw or what we've seen with the NBA All-Star game in itself, with the way that these guys don't really come out and they don't play hard and compete at a high level. I just think that overall it was just a great move by the NBA to finally move this deadline to where it represents its own importance as far as the timeline goes. I think too many people got tied up with the NBA All-Star weekend and the trade deadline and really could never, set between the those two ends.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And, another thing too, moving it up a little bit earlier allows players to get acclimated with their new team faster and easier too, So you couple that with the longer break that we have between All-Star, after All-Star and the regular season beginning in the quote-unquote second half, then it just gives time to a little bit, again, players more time to get acclimated with the new roster. So overall, I think sweeping moves that make a lot of sense for the league and the flow of what the league is trying to do. I like this for the NBA, and I think it's going to be a positive impact coming up in the season.
All right, new changes, more money being thrown out, and an impressive NBA Summer League. This has been a top-notch quality show, going through all of these topics and storylines that are developing as we enter off of this last leg of the NBA offseason. And then before we know it, we're already focusing our attention to training camp and the new teammates and rosters that will be built up for this upcoming NBA season. All good, all aboard, Mr. Shaw.
Absolutely. Again, just amazing to cover these things. We are heading into the dog days of summer, or as Game of Thrones would say, winter is here for us. Although it's summertime, it's going to be a little bit more barren these upcoming weeks. And I know a lot of podcasts are going to be taking some time off, and maybe we'll do some ourselves as well too. But we're going to still keep the content going. There's still always news and conversation to be had about the NBA. Summer League will be wrapped up by the time we record our next show. And some stragglers out there in free agency that we haven't seen sign yet as we record. We think of a guy like Nerlens Noel in Dallas, although he's almost assuredly going back there. He's not re-signed yet. Pau Gasol could go somewhere and maybe be impactful if he doesn't return to San Antonio. So a couple names out there that still make a lot of sense and that can help some teams out there. So we'll make sure we get that to you on our next upcoming episode.
Most definitely. So once again, we appreciate you and yours for tuning in during the dog days of summer as we keep you abreast of things happening here in the association. For the Baseline, Cali, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do. Stay cool. And we'll catch up with you